Hello.
Hi there, I'm Tony Gerber, director of the Notorious Mr Bout, and we are at the Full Frame Documentary Festival.
Now, how did you get involved right off the bat with Mr. Bout?
It's interesting, I was doing a lot of research around wars in Africa for a fiction project, and around the same time I was actually in East Africa making a documentary for National Geographic on pilots. It was called Congo Bush Pilots, so I was flying in and out of little dirt strips with lots of very brave aviators, and got to know some of these Russian and Ukrainian pilots who were flying these very old Antonovs and Ilyushins, and became very intrigued by this world, these sort of ex-Soviet era pilots and these planes that had serviced wars in Afghanistan, and now they're sort of working freelance in Africa, flying Cassiterite and Colton, and in some cases peacekeepers. And so it was a very, very interesting milieu. And again and again we would hear the name Victor Bout. And so I began doing open source research and began to read about this guy. Now this is before Lord of War was made, right? So what's available in terms of knowledge of this guy is just absolutely fascinating. He reads like a character from a Hollywood movie. So I became more and more intrigued, and by circumstance ended up making a film about another arms dealer for National Geographic, a guy named Monzer El Kassar, who is known as the Prince of Marbella. And so I got to know this group of DEA agents. And at the time we were making the film about Kassar, they had just come back from Thailand, where they had caught Victor Bout in this buy and bust operation, and he was sitting in a Thai prison cell waiting extradition. And they were very skeptical whether or not they'd be able to get him back to New York. He became sort of a pawn in this political tug of war between the U.S. and Russia. So I worked with these guys. We made this film about Monzer, but the whole time, and it really, Victor is the subject that had me deeply, deeply intrigued. 2 years later, he was extradited successfully to New York to stand trial, and I began attending the trial. And it was at the trial that I met Maxim Pozdorovkin, and this is before he had made Pussy Riot. He was there working on an article. And we connected. He's a Russian citizen, and we realized that we had a lot of shared sensibilities and curiosity about Bout. And at the time, both of us sort of believing to some extent that this is the Merchant of Death, right? In the course of getting to know the wife and working to gain access, we discovered that there was something like 150 to 200 hours of home movie footage. Now, this is a man who's known as a sort of Kaiser Sose, lurks in the shadows, 5 different passports, changes his name and his identity, wires money from shell company to shell company. This is not the kind of guy who would have 200 hours of home movie footage, right? I mean, it would seem like a security risk for a guy like that. So there was this sort of discrepancy in understanding, and something didn't add up. And that, for me, became this kind of nexus moment in which I realized there's an interesting film here, and where it will lead us, we don't know until you begin to follow the leads, right? So that really is the genesis of the project.
Now, what was your reaction the first time you started seeing the home movies and you go, "This is not Nick Cage, this is Paul Blart"?
Well, there's an interesting process of let me think about how to put that. There's an interesting process of regaining your sensitivity to what's in the footage, right? So you approach the footage with the belief that there's going to be a lot of guns, and that there's going to be criminal activity, and that there's going to be these incredible sort of smoky backroom moments, which is sort of the assumption of the life of an arms dealer, and instead what you get are saunas and naked rolls in the snow, and you get life peppered every now and then with a business deal or with some footage from the cargo hold of an Ilyushin. So what the point is that in engaging with the home movie footage, you have to sort of leave your expectations or your assumptions at the door. Um, um, the quantity of material was a bit overwhelming. We put together a team of Russian translators, of Russian-speaking interns. So to begin to go through the material and catalog it and begin to translate and subtitle it was a bit of a Herculean task. The point is that in terms of calibrating the sensitivity to it, what needs to be in the film and what should not be in the film, was a difficult task, right? Because sometimes the most seemingly banal moments are the most revealing moments. This is what I mean about sort of regaining your sensitivity or recalibrating your sensitivity toward what's a golden moment in that home movie footage. So it was a long and interesting process.
Now, did you get to face-to-face meet him, or was it all over the email?
Mm-hmm. No, both Maxim and I visited Victor in prison. He was in 2 different facilities in New York City. One in downtown Manhattan in the special housing unit, which is down on Pearl Street, and then they moved him to Brooklyn. In fact, 15 blocks from my edit room, and we visited him several times in each of those locations. It was a quite fascinating process, and again, the sort of process of stripping away or undermining expectations. First time I sat down to meet him down on Pearl Street, I had some trepidation, man. Everything I knew about him at that point was that this is the Merchant of Death, what is his attitude going to be toward me as an American? Mm-hmm. I found him very wound up, but incredibly personable. He comes into the room. He was in a unit in which he's in total isolation. The lights are on 24/7. So the man is under a tremendous amount of stress. He's brought in. You sit in this little room, linoleum room, and this little crappy table. And they lock down the entire wing of the prison when he moves, because he's considered a high security risk. And he comes in with both arms and legs in shackles. And it's a trippy experience.
Is it more of a shock after you sit there for hours watching the home movie footage going, this guy isn't that dangerous, is he?
The home movie footage came later. And there's many different ways of defining danger, right? And we know that, right? From our legal system, but he was, as I said, very, very stressed and hyped up and wanted to talk. And one of the things we connected over was Africa, because I'd made a number of films in Africa at that point, and one of them about bush pilots, which is sort of an area that he knows something about. And what I came to realize about this guy is that he was kind of an amateur filmmaker. This is before we had seen the home movie footage, mind you, before we had access yet. He was, a very sharp intellect with tremendous curiosity. I'd say anger at what had happened to him, but not a blistering red-hot anger, sort of a tempered anger. But it was a fascinating meeting, and it was the first of several. But he's a walking contradiction. He's just the complete opposite of what you would expect from having done the open source research. So the point is that it's near impossible to research this man and get a complete and total picture of who he is.
Has he seen the film yet?
No, he hasn't, and he won't see it until it's broadcast. Because ironically, he's seen in the course of making this film, I've made a couple of other documentaries for National Geographic that he's been able to catch in prison, and he's always sent me notes and feedback on them, which I find sort of funny, because he's, as I said, sort of an amateur filmmaker. Yeah.
Is it an odd relationship you have with him currently, that he is sending you notes and stuff still? Or?
It's collegial. I mean, the other interesting thing for me, I think there is sort of a fundamental distrust of me as an American, right? And so the fact that we were a Russian-U.S. co-production gave us a special kind of access, because we also had the trust of the Department of Justice and the DEA. So this is a film about it's not a trial film, so I can't say it's about a court case, but it's about an issue in which there are very much two sides. In this sort of new era of new Cold War that we find ourselves, right? There are two sides, Russia and U.S., and over guilt or innocence, right? And the justification of this buy and bust operation. Both sides consider themselves absolutely in the right. So both sides are eager and willing to talk to the right people, right? To folks that they consider to be sympathetic to their cause. So that was sort of a perfect storm for a filmmaker, you know.
Okay.